And this is Web36 with Gabe. And we are studying DOM2 events. All right. So in terms of the first two objectives, the Node objectives, we're going to do a really quick exercise just to kick the tires off your installation of Node and just make sure that things are at least somewhat okay. So find a terminal, and it doesn't matter what location, just pop a terminal at any directory. And then let's do npm-v. All right. So if you get a version, that's pretty good. And if you do node-v and get a version, that's even better. Okay. So one thing we can do with npm is install packages. All right. So packages are just programs that live in a directory in the npm. In npm is a tool that allows to install these packages in our projects, or we can even install packages globally on our computer. All right. So here's an example of us installing a package globally on our computer. We can do this from any location. Again, let's do npm install -g. That means install globally the following package. And let's try installing one of my favorite packages in the entire world, fkill CLI. Right? fkill CLI. Right? Now, hit enter, and this will install a tool on the computer, and we will be able to use this tool from any location. Right? It's a command line tool. fkill CLI is a command line tool, and we can use fkill CLI to kill processes on our computer using the command line. Right? Its usage is very simple. If your installation was successful, all right, you should be able to simply type fkill, hit enter, and you get a list of processes going on here. You can see Zoom taking a whole lot of resources, but we better not kill that one, huh? And yeah, this is the list of the top resource hogs on my computer right now. Okay, so we will use fkill in the future, but for now it's just an excuse to use npm to install a package globally and see if npm works. All right. Now, how do we get out of fkill CLI? The same way we get out of the start script when we do npm start and we need to kill it, we do Control C, right? Control C is the way to gracefully terminate a process that's blocking the terminal. All right, cool. How did it go? Give me a thumbs up if you were able to install fkill CLI. Okay, Joshua. Okay, Joshua. Okay, Maxwell. Whomever. So we need to fix those computers. We need to fix those computers today. All right. Don't sweat it too much. The guided project can still be run by simply opening the HTML in Chrome. All right. Okay, away with that. Control L cleans your terminal, and let's go back to today's repo. So this was posted on Slack 1 hour before lecture. So let's go ahead and grab a clone link. I'm going to go back to my terminal, move to my home folder, which is where I keep all of my projects, and git clone this thing, call it GP, move into GP. Again, it's good that you do these moves ahead of the lecture, all right, in case there's technical problems. Git status on branch main, all good, all right. Let's open VS Code at this location. All right, and let's take a look at the README. And it says clone from GitHub, we did that. Navigate into the project, we did that. Okay, npm install, npm start. These commands need to be run at the location of the project, all right? So pop the built-in terminal inside VS Code using, if you need, the terminal menu. And you won't need for long because you are going to memorize this shortcut, aren't you? Okay. The integrated terminal makes it so that you don't have to fuss with directories and just, it's just a pain in the butt to navigate the terminal to the right folder. Okay, so if you open VS Code at the root of the project and then open a terminal, it's already where it should be. And we can comfortably run our commands, right, like get status, and it's going to be fine, right? So let's do npm install. npm I is short for npm install. Give it a second. And before we do npm start, let's discuss for a second what it is that npm install is doing right now, okay? Now, this seems to have succeeded. That's great. I'm going to close the terminal for now. So this project is meant to be managed with npm. All right, how do we know? Because there's a package.json file. All right, so if you do not have a package.json, no point in running npm install, because what npm install does is it looks inside the package.json looking for packages to install on the project, right? Dependencies, other programs. Here we can see two areas where we have project dependencies. There's a dependencies object, which is empty. So our code, the code itself is not using any external libraries or anything like that. But there's a bunch of dev dependencies, right? And these are dev dependencies because these programs that are installed with a project are not being used in our code. They're tooling for the programmer. For example, ESLint is a linter. It's going to complain when our code seems to be incorrect, okay? Parcel bundler is a project compiler. So when we execute parcel bundler, it's just going to compile the project and serve it from a development server right on our computer, okay? So what npm install did was like, hey, I'm going to open the package.json. I'm going to look for dependencies. Oh, there's these two dependencies. Okay, so I'm going to download them from the npm repository, and I'm going to put them inside this node modules folder. Okay, so if you refresh your folders a little bit and expand your node modules, you'll be like, oh my goodness, look at all that. Look at all that. ESLint is there, all right? So these two programs ought to be in there. Let me see if I can find it. Can you find it? Yeah, there it is. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. So why are we getting hundreds of libraries instead of just these two, right? So it looks like npm install, the npm install command kind of overdid it, right? Because we have two declared dependencies for the project and it downloaded like hundreds, all right? The reason is each of these projects is in turn an npm project complete with its own package.json, right? So here I found ESLint. Inside this humongous folder, I managed to find ESLint. And see, it has a package.json of its own, right? Click on it, and inside of here somewhere, oh, look at all of that. Look at all of that. So ESLint itself has dependencies, right? And each of these dependencies, quite likely, also has dependencies. All of them get downloaded and flattened out inside this node modules folder, right? So instead of creating an awkward tree of dependencies, it kind of, just puts all of the dependencies and the dependencies, and the dependencies, they all end up top level inside the node modules folder, right? So that is why, despite our project only having 2 direct dependencies, when we ran npm install, actually hundreds of dependencies downloaded, right? So let's see how many. It doesn't say. It doesn't say. I thought it said. All right. Okay, never mind. Questions, my friends? Okay, so it's important that we start getting accustomed to npm projects, right? It's super comfortable, because we don't have to think. We don't have to think how to launch a project. We just go to the README and follow instructions, all right? So we did npm install. Speaking of the README, what was next? npm start, all right. So I wonder what it is npm start going to do under the hood. So everybody type npm start if you didn't already. And npm start, what it does under the hood, it executes parcel pointing to the index.html of the project. So it's basically compiling the project and serving it up on localhost 1234. All right. So now we can follow the link, and here's our project. All right. Questions, my friends? Any difficulties with? If your node is still broken, and you can't do npm install, npm start, no big deal today. Just expand the source folder, find index.html, and just open it up with Chrome. All right, just open it up in Chrome. I don't know. Let me reveal in Finder, and now there's the HTML. I can simply double click on it, and there it is. All right. Cool. So that is the end of the npm segment, the node npm segment of the day. Okay. I'll be happy to answer questions about it later. So let's get on with events. All right. Let's get on with events. Cool. Let me just reacquire my bearings. Did I just close the? I must have. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Cool. All right. Any errors in the console? No errors in the console. Console log project is up. Reload, reload. Okay. Cool. So let's take a look at this thing in VS Code. And let me just before I forget, let me start committing changes. Okay, cool. Now, oh, I have a change. No changes. Cool. All good. All good. So the HTML for this thing, it's just like it's just a pop-up window. We're going to build a pop-up window, and the idea being that when we click on the launch button here, we are going to see a modal window or a pop-up. Okay. It's all of this HTML down here, all of this HTML right here. You can see it's not currently displaying anywhere on the page because of this little magic class name going on there. So if you just take off that class name, you can see the pop-up showing there. Okay. And if we put that class name back on the HTML, the pop-up goes away. All right. So you might want to turn on autosave, okay, and give that a try. Give that a try. Give me a thumbs up if it's working for you. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So when we pop when we open the modal, the user can either say yes or no, right? So they can confirm or cancel. And if they happened to confirm, let me put that class name back on. This success message, which is currently turned off, also auto display. So let me just simulate that by tinkering with the HTML. So this is what happens after confirming. And if you happen to cancel, this is what you'd see instead, right? But we are not going to touch the HTML at all to achieve all of this functionality. We are going to achieve all of this functionality through code, through JavaScript, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at, still inside the source folder, pop open index.js because all of the action is going to happen right here, okay? And this is our console log going on there, all right? This index.js is linked to the HTML via, of course, this script tag going on there, okay? Who knows what this defer attribute does? Who knows what that defer attribute does? Puts the JS at the bottom, makes the script run last in the head. Okay, it takes it to the bottom right about the last body tag. Okay. All right. So you're all correct. The defer attribute, what happens, it tells Chrome, because Chrome is parsing the HTML in order, right? So I'm Chrome, I'm parsing this document. And then the script is encountered. In terms of this script, there's two operations that need to happen. On the one hand, we need to download the script, and then we need to execute the script, all right? So the defer, what it does, it downloads the script as Chrome keeps parsing the HTML, all right? So you have heard someplace that JavaScript is single-threaded and only one operation can happen at a time, and that's kind of true. But Chrome is a multi-threaded, very powerful machine. It can do many things at once. So Chrome is downloading the script while it continues the parsing. And when the download is done, it does not execute it immediately. It waits until the last of the HTML is parsed. Why would that be? Why would that be? Why wait, right? Why wait for the DOM to be fully constructed? It would be faster for a script to run immediately, right? As soon as it's downloaded. Why would we want to wait? It sounds like a performance penalty there. Oh, so you can access the HTML elements, right? Oh, okay, so it has all the tags it needs to run, okay. So we can ensure that the elements are there. That is all correct, all right? So in the days before the defer attribute, okay, so let's take out the defer attribute. Let's just for fun, let's take out the defer attribute there for a second. And then come back to index.js and try and grab me the button. Try and grab me the button. See what happens. Okay, so fix me line number 6. Try and get me the button. Now that the defer attribute is gone. Get me line 6. Give you a minute or so to do that. You're all busy grabbing me the launch button. We're going to need it. Okay, who should we steal from? Who's going to be my favorite student for all time? Brian, you're seeing a completely different project? Make sure you're cloning this one. Let me see. So scroll up a little bit on the main Web36 channel, all right? So this is the repo we're working on right now, okay? All right, so let's steal. Who are we stealing from today? Excellent, everybody. Excellent work. Let's steal from William. Okay. So William is saying, William suggests doing the following, right? So document.querySelector, grabbing the launch button, and that looks legit to me. Okay. Cool. So let's see if it went well. Let me just console log that thing. See if you can be my favorite student for all time. Okay, there we go. Oh, ouch. Ouch. What's going on? I'm not sure what's going on. Let's make our console log more sophisticated. The button, comma, there. Okay, it's gonna work now for sure. Ouch. Ouch. I don't know what's going on. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? I know what's going on. I know what's going on. William, it's your fault. The selector is bad. That's what's going on, right? William, you failed us. Is that what's going on? The defer keyword. Okay, but how would the lack of defer keyword break this line? The script runs before the button is created, right? So yes. So yes, excellent. The JavaScript file doesn't know where to find launch button. So the DOM is not fully constructed, right? So without the defer attribute, the script downloads and executes before the parsing of the document continues. Very important, right? So there's of course we could fix it by putting back the defer attribute, right? Now let's prove that, okay, and this proves that William, of course, did a great job there. Okay, the defer attribute fixes it. There's an older fix which consists in moving the script tag all the way to the end of the body, right? Right before the closing of the body tag. That also guarantees, by the time Chrome reaches this point, the DOM has been constructed up to here. Okay, so the button is already there, so it also works. That's another fix. But the last fix I'm going to show you by putting back the script on the head. So everybody, please go back to a broken state. Go back to a broken state. Put your script tag there back at the top. And then remove the defer attribute. One way we can guarantee that the button is there by the time our program runs would be to wrap well, actually, let's just type it. Let me just show you. So people would do variations of the following: window dot onload, okay, equal function, okay, and then all of your program here. Okay, so let's move the launch button. I'm cutting it out, putting it in there. Okay, and all of a sudden it's working. So what is going on? What is going on? This is one aspect of event-driven programming. Instead of writing a program at the top of our script, we schedule a function to execute on some event, right? So basically what we're saying is, okay, so when the window load event fires, right, because the browser's firing events left and right, okay, so the browser is broadcasting signals every time anything happens to the page, right? The page loads, the mouse moves, the user clicks buttons, right? So anything that happens on the page, Chrome knows and notices. And this is one mechanism we can schedule code to run on the load event, on the load event, right? So this is basically saying, hey, when the window loads, execute this function. Okay? And that fixes our problems because this code runs only after the DOM has fully constructed. All right. Cool. Okay, so let's put back the launch button where it belongs and get rid of this let's just fix the program. Let's just put back the defer attribute. Let's just put back the defer attribute. If the browser you're targeting supports it, the defer attribute is probably the way you want to go. Okay. That way you can put your script wherever. And you don't need to wrap your entire program inside an unload. All right. If you can't use the defer attribute, for example. Questions regarding all of this? Any questions on defer? So defer makes it so that the script is downloaded concurrently with the parsing of the document, but its execution is deferred until the entire document is parsed and the DOM fully constructed. All right, so that's our first taste of event-driven programming. If you have any experience with jQuery or things like that, so it is very common to schedule code to run only after the page has loaded, right? And this is an old technique to do that. Cool. So before we go on a break and before I put you all to sleep, please, I'm going to start a timer and let you complete all of these selections. All right. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And if you don't find it too distracting, I'm happy to answer questions in the meantime. Okay. So Jennifer asks, so you only use window onload when there's defer missing, or are there other reasons to use it? If you want to make absolutely sure that a piece of code runs after the load event, okay, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Using this guarantees that any code in here is not executed until the load event fires on the tab. Right? And you're not depending on defer attributes. You don't have to worry about anything. You're guaranteed. You're guaranteed. So any situation you're in where you want to guarantee that a code waits for document load, this is a way to go. Okay. Let me start a thread. And great job, William. I don't know if I said it. All right, let's take a look. Who shall we steal from? Let's steal from Thomas. Let me see. Or perhaps Marcos. Or perhaps James. Okay, because I'm gonna just replace everything. And I don't want to think. And James has even the comments there, so we don't lose them. So I'm gonna, bam, replace everything in there. And take a quick look. Well, that looks pretty legit. I don't have a problem with that, right? And if there's a problem, it will show up later. It would take quite a few console logs to check all of these, but I can teach you a technique to not have to type all of those console logs. But first, let's take a 5-minute break and come back for more. Welcome back, my friends. So we are working on event handlers, and we are about to work on task 2. I'm just going to, I feel good about these selectors, so we are just going to move on and take a look at that second task. Demo handling click events on button on the launch button. All right, so click events, because events come in a wide variety of types, as you saw in the pre-class videos, right? So if you Google MDN types of events, we should be able to find the event reference on MDN. And each event has their own little personality. They're used slightly differently, but you can see there's many of them. There's many of them. Again, the browser knows everything that's going on the tab, right? And we need the browser's collaboration because, again, our programs do nothing pretty much until the user starts clicking, scrolling, hovering, or doing things like that, or doing actions, right? Actions on the page. So our code needs to kind of schedule code to happen on certain events, right? And Chrome is aware of all of these. There's events for all kinds of things. I mean, check this out. Check this out. There's even events for the clipboard, right? So if the user uses copy and paste, the browser can basically tell your code, hey, the user used copy and paste. Do you want to do something about it? So we have the opportunity with our program, we have an opportunity to take action on any of these events listed on this page, right? And it's as you see, it's a monster list. There's hundreds of things inside of there. Okay, so most of the conversation here is going to apply to clicks, all right? But just keep in mind, there's many different types, okay? Now, let's just attach code for the event of clicks on the launch button, right? And we're going to learn 3 techniques, starting with a super ancient technique, a newer technique, which is still horrible, and then the new and improved technique for attaching functionality to elements depending on the event, okay? So technique number 1 to handle the click of the button would be inside the HTML itself, and it is super gross. So find the button inside the index HTML and type on click low caps. Let's do console.log in single quotes. You got to use different quotes. Do not do this. All right. So yeah, take it for a drive, and yeah, it's just gross, okay? But there it is. So this is very similar. Attaching this attribute on the HTML is basically the same thing as doing the following inside our code, and it's going to look familiar. Are you good with this? Were you able to catch up with this? Right? On click, low caps, double quotes surrounding everything. Console log something, single quotes, and then take it for a drive. Make sure it works. All right. So this is kind of the same as doing the following. It's the same as doing launch button dot on click low caps equals function and then your console log. Old way. Okay, old way. Try that. So what happens in your opinion? What was the effect of adding this code? Are we getting both console logs now? We must be, right? We must be getting two console logs. As we click on the button, we must be getting do not do this and also old way, right? Ooh. Okay, so it seems like this one overwrites the other one because they're basically doing the same thing. This is we are using dot notation to write something to the onClick attribute of this particular element. So we're, and only one property called onClick fits on a single element, right? So this is rather gross, right? So as you said, clicking on the button gives us old way, right? So this code smashes this monstrosity here, all right, on the HTML. But this is still pretty bad because what Meg is saying on the channel. Only one click handler fits for a given button, and that kind of sucks a little bit. It is very common. It is very common that you might want to have any number of functions attached to the button that do something on the event of a click. All right. So enter the new and improved mechanism, right? And it's simply launch button, add event listener, right? This is a method instead of a property that we're overriding, okay? It's just a little bit more complicated, than doing it like this, because add event listener takes two arguments. The first argument is a string with the type of event we care about, in this case, click, okay? This is the name of the event. And the second argument is, you guessed it, a callback, right? A callback, which takes an event and in here, handle the event, the click event. Right. Project goes back to compiling. Let's console log. Much better. All right, much better. And it is much better because we, what if there are other scripts on the page that try and do the same thing, just simply overwrite the onClick property on the button? Because this page could have any number of scripts on it, and they all have access to the DOM, right? So if we have 3 different scripts inside of our project, they can all mess with a DOM. Okay, so potentially they can all try and overwrite the onClick property of an element, right? So this is particularly atrocious, right? You could rewrite this in a much better way by doing window, add event listener, but this time is the load event, and here goes our function that takes an event object. We'll take a look at that in a second, and let's move these comments down here, okay? Probably not a good idea. Okay. So add event listener is much safer because you're not overwriting potentially what somebody else did on a particular attribute of the element, right? And we can use this technique any number of times, okay? So going back to this one, we could copy and paste this code 5 times, right? And now if we click on a single click of the button, it gives us all of these console logs. All right. Questions about add event listener? We're very close to being able to make our pages interactive. Get rid of that. Cool. Give me a thumbs up if you're following so far. Give me a thumbs down if you're getting lost. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. So, and this is how our programs go. We basically schedule code to happen on certain events. Okay, and we attach those functions to particular elements on the page. Okay. So what is the event object? What is the event argument about? The event object gives you information about the event that fired, right? So for example, we could console log information. So everybody type console log backticks because we're going to interpolate variables inside of our string. And let's do event type colon, and then interpolate me a variable inside of there. Type event dot type. Okay. Click on the button, and the event type is click. Right. I'm going to disable that old console log. There we go. Okay. I'm going to format this a little bit better because I'm going to make use of the multi-line ability of these template literals with the backticks. Okay. So these are really cool strings you can use. Multi-line, and with a $sign in the curly brackets, we can interpolate variables inside. So let's do event target. Okay. The event target is the thing that got clicked, or the most deeply thing that got clicked. Let's do event target. All right, let's try that. And ouch. Ouch. Okay, because event target is a DOM element. It's a very big object, right? So that is not console logging nicely, right? So let's do event.target.node name. All right. Try that. Cool. Okay, cool. So the event type is a click. The event target is a button. All right. What other things? Time stamp. The time of the event. Event dot timestamp. Try that. And this is how many milliseconds after the tab loaded when the event fired. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to let you play with it a little bit, format it a little bit nicer. Maybe even divide this by 1000 and get so we can convert from milliseconds into seconds. So that is cool. We can not just interpolate variables in there, we can interpolate any valid JavaScript expression we can interpolate right in there. Okay. Still rather ugly. Let's round down all those decimals by doing math.floor. All of that. Okay. Okay. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. Boom. 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 All right. Questions, my friends. Sam is asking, could you please go over the callback function in the event listener? What is its role? Can we just link an external callback function into the add event listener? Yes, sir. So again, what this code overall is doing is basically scheduling that callback, which is called an event handler or an event listener. This callback, we are scheduling it to execute on the event of a click that fires on this element here. Okay. Does that make sense? And we can absolutely pull it out. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to cut it and declare it right here. I'm going to call it function event listener. It's a terrible name for an event listener, by the way, but it's just for teaching purposes. Oops, apologies. And so here's the function called event listener. It still takes an event object. It still logs all of that information about the event, its type, the innermost thing that got clicked, and number of seconds after tab load, right? But there we're just calling add event listener and passing the two arguments. Perhaps this is easier to see, that add event listener is just a method elements have, document also has it, window also has it, as you've seen, right? So we're saying basically, hey, on clicks to launch button, execute this event listener, no sooner, right? So you can see how we can reload the page. Nothing. Only on the event of a click does this functionality happen, okay? And of course, what we do in there is up to us, but we have absolute power over the DOM as we saw yesterday. So we can pretty much do any DOM manipulation that we wish instead of these event listeners, right? Okay, Harry, so we use the newer version, right? Not the old ones, correct. I think it's very rare that you should need to use the older syntax. It's fatally flawed in the sense that, only one, say, for example, only one fits per element or per node. So always stick with a newer syntax. Okay, it would be a really, really strange situation that you would have to be targeting super ancient Explorer browsers or something. Okay. For reasonably modern browsers, add event listener is the way to go. All right. Cool. So let's see, do we have time? Yeah, let's take a look at task 3, all right? So let's create a function that launches. It should open the confirmation modal, okay? Add it as an event listener for click events on the launch button. So you get the idea. We need to handle the event of a click, and we don't need to delete this code. As we said, we can fit however, we can use add event listener on the same on the same element. We can do it multiple times, right? And bang, okay. I guess we would need different functions. They're not accumulating because it's the exact same listener, all right? But we can do task 3 without deleting this particular, right? So do you feel confident you can tackle task 3, or do you need more hints? Give me a thumbs up if you just want to dive in. Give me a thumbs down if you want more hints, a little bit more help. Okay, so so the idea is that you go through these very steps, identical steps, except that instead of doing a console log, you are actually going to toggle that off class name, which is what's keeping our modal hidden. Okay, so we need to flip the switch on that particular class name. Start a timer. I hope it's not too annoying. I can answer questions in the meantime. Let's see. Juan asks, how does add event listener know to perform the function on click? Well, it's the little secret is that it's actually the browser itself, kind of, that executes the function at the right time. Because the browser knows exactly when the launch, when the click happens. So it is the browser that executes the function. The browser knows the particulars about the event. So when the browser invokes the event listener, it passes this argument into the function so that our code has all the information about the event. Okay. For event-driven programming, we need the collaboration of the environment. Jake, can you give an example of a use case where we would want to manipulate the DOM? Yes, pretty much. Whenever you're building a single page application, meaning an app that feels like a desktop application, you need to do DOM manipulation like this. The old way of using, PHP and having the server give us fully fleshed out HTML has the downside that whenever you want to see anything different, you need to kind of navigate to a different document. And that causes an instant of reload, an instant of unresponsiveness, and then the page has to load. The thing about DOM surgery is that it is super fast compared to loading an entire new document. Okay, so DOM surgery performed on the front end with our JavaScript is what allows web applications to feel like desktop programs. I don't know if that is if that is good enough for now, Jake. Okay, I'm going to make a thread on Slack. James. Oh, don't apologize. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure your selectors are fine. Let me just create a thread. 3, task 3. Okay, thread. Oops. Task 3. All right, I'm gonna grab from Maddie. Okay, so Maddie is saying, okay, let's call this function launch modal. It takes an event object with all the information about that future event. And then on modal, we toggle the off class name on the modal using class list, okay? So let's take this for drive, reload the page, take this for drive, and what? Cannot read property class list of null. So, okay, so time to learn. Time to learn the quick technique for verifying all of our variables there in scope, okay? So James is suggesting that the selector for the modal might be defective, which is why query selector can't find it. Okay, we're talking here. Apparently there's some sort of problem with this selector. It says module instead of modal. Ow! All right, excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's change that back to modal and take that for a drive. Whoa! All right, nice, 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 nice. Okay. Okay, so you see what happens when you just continue coding without like thoroughly checking what you've written so far? So here's a quick technique for taking a look at all the variables that you have so far, right? You need to have DevTools open for this technique to work. So everybody open DevTools there. Let's reload the page to start from scratch. And right after where it says mode, let's just say I want to inspect all of these variables, right? So let's break it again. Let's go back to module, I think it said, right? So this is the code we had, but we just wrote all of those variables and we want to make sure their values are correct. So everybody type debugger in there. And if DevTools was open, the page will reload and execution of the program will pause right where it says debugger. Okay, so let's make this a little bit taller. And you can see this might look a little bit scary. Don't worry about it. You should be on the sources tab where you can actually see the code. You can see the breakpoint we just typed. And here down here where it says scope in local, we can see all of the variables that are visible from this region of the program, okay? So we can see a cancel button, which looks good, a confirm button, okay? We have an add event listener, which is the function which we wrote. Ignore exports for now, but we have failure message, that looks good. The launch button, that looks good. The launch modal, which is the event listener here, right? So variables or functions that are declared at the same level as the breakpoint show up in here, right? Now you can see modal, it says null. Modal is null, which so really quickly we can audit all of the variables to verify their values. Now, how do we get unstuck from a breakpoint? Find the blue arrow and allow execution of a program to proceed to the end of the script. All right. So we are out of the breakpoint. We can fix the code. Let's do modal. Right. Save your changes, and Parcel is automatically loading the page again if you were able to run your project with npm start, right? Otherwise, you have to keep constantly reloading the page manually. Okay. And now modal is looking good, right? It's a div, actually, oopsie, with a class name of sources there. Now the modal is looking good. A div with a class name, with both these class names of modal off, right? And the blue arrow, do not reload the page while you are stuck in a breakpoint. Become unstuck by either pressing the blue arrow or simply closing DevTools. Simply closing DevTools liberates you from your breakpoints, and now you can reload the page, open DevTools, reload again, and bam, breakpoint. Okay, this is a very, very powerful debugging technique. Okay, blue arrow. And these breakpoints, we can put them anywhere we'd like. We can put these breakpoints anywhere we'd like. All right. We can put this breakpoint inside the event listener. Right. We can move. We can move the breakpoint inside this launch modal. Okay. And again, with DevTools open, ready, bam. There's our breakpoint. Now we're seeing a different set of variables under local because we are in a different region of the program right now, right? So we're in a much smaller scope, right? In the immediate variables that are visible from this line are just the event object, which is getting injected through the arguments. And there you can actually very easily see all the stuff that comes inside the event object. Okay. You can see that the modal hasn't popped up because execution is paused right before we do dumb surgery, right? So it's like Neo with the bullets floating in midair. Okay, so this line hasn't executed yet. Okay, time for break. Starting a 5-minute timer. See you in 5, my friends. Hello, we are back, and cool. So let's practice this move a little bit more. Close DevTools. Oh, there's the modal. All right. Open DevTools. Reload the page and launch. There's the breakpoint. We added there inside the listener. We could have, I saw something on Slack. Yes, of course, we can always declare the listeners right there. We can inline the listener. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the nice thing about functions. Functions are just like any other value. We can just we can inline a function declaration in there, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. So now, how do we step through the code line by line, right? Because we're stuck there right before the CSS. I mean the class name toggling happens. See that second icon after the blue arrow? If you click it, you move the green line over to the next line, right? It still hasn't executed. The highlighted line hasn't executed quite yet. But if you click that second icon again, boom, there's the modal. So you can see your program playing out in slow motion, line by line. Right? And of course, the blue arrow takes you to the end. Right? So I'm going to do it in once more and let you do it. Okay. Make sure DevTools is open. Make sure you're free from an endpoint, right? If you're still stuck in an endpoint, close DevTools, open DevTools, reload, launch. Step over, let go. Close, open, reload, launch. Step over, blue. So try and get the hang of it a little bit, okay? Looking at Slido in the meantime. Do we always use class list for the toggle? So actually, that reminds me that I'm not sure it's interesting that we used a toggle. It's interesting that we used a toggle instead of simply add, right? But yes, whenever we're juggling class names, it is recommended that we use class list. All right, so let's take this new code for a drive. Reload, launch, step over. Oh, actually, it's not add, of course, it's remove. Excellent. Let's see, remove. Let's see if that works. Thank you for calling that out. Launch, step over, there's the modal, blue. Okay, more questions. Shouldn't it be event.classList instead of modal.classList? Okay, so so that's an interesting consideration. Let me take out the breakpoint for now, and let's discuss this for a second. All right, so what we want to do is handle the event of a click on the button, right? So the idea being there that we, on the button, we do add event listener for clicks, and then execute this function, this launch modal, which is declared up there. All right. Now, why are we juggling class names on the modal instead of on the button? Because the reason, as we saw at the beginning of class, the reason for the modal being hidden at all, it is because of this class name on the modal, on the div, right? So inside of here, we can do any DOM surgery. And in this case, the DOM surgery that's warranted is toggling or removing the off class name from the modal window, right? So the modal window is kept hidden because of an off class name on it, not on the button. Does that make sense? It's very common to think about this, so why do we toggle rather than on? Okay. Now I understand your question, because it is simply the off keyword. Let me see. Because the CSS on the page, the style sheet is set up so that this off class name is what keeps this modal hidden. So we need to play with it, right? Okay, cool. So let's see what are one more. Okay, cool. The Slido is clean. Let's take care of tasks. Let's take care of task 4. All right. Let's create a function to confirm the launch. It should close the modal and display a success report. The success report, if we take a look again at the HTML, these are the success and the failure reports, and they are kept out of sight via, again, these special class names that apply some CSS to the effect of hiding them. All right. So munch through task 4 a little bit. Okay, so let's steal from Marcos. Marcos says, okay, on the confirmation button, add event listener, click, of course, and it's a callback. You are using an arrow function, and you are inlining the function and using the arrow syntax. That is just fine. And you're saying, okay, on the modal, oh, I see. You all like toggle a lot. Even though toggle might seem like it does the job, it's to avoid, logic bugs there in the future. It's better. So, I mean, sometimes we need toggle, but if we mean to turn off, it's better to turn off. And if we mean to turn on, it's better to turn on, meaning it's better to either add or remove the class name instead of toggling, even though toggling might kind of do the job. Again, I know, I can feel the skepticism, but it sets you up for future bugs, right? So I'm saying, okay, so if we mean to close the modal, let's just add that class. Let's be super explicit. We mean to hide the modal, so just add the class name, and then the success message, we need to show it, so let's just remove that off class name. Does that make sense? Do you agree or disagree, Marcos? What do you think? Anyway, let's go back. Let's go back to your code there for a second, right? Test it out. Launch, confirm, nice, all right? It works. Now, if we launch again, yeah, we're still seeing something funny going on there. Okay. Now let's Marcos, look at this. Now let's this is my proposal for this same thing. Let's add and remove. Take it for a drive, launch, confirm. Okay, same effect. But again, this is kind of, even though toggle worked, this is kind of more explicit than what it is that we need to do. And since it can never hurt anything, does that make sense? It's open for debate. What's not open for debate, though, is that this is weird that we're still showing, if we try to launch again after a success, that success message is still showing. That's kind of weird. Can you all think of a way to fix that? Wouldn't it be nice that after, the happy message shows, if we try and launch again, we should kind of get rid of the old success message? Timeout. Add to the launch. Okay, so we have two approaches. Caroline suggests using a timeout to get rid of the success message eventually. And some of you are proposing applying a little fix to the launch function, right? So having launch clean up. So this is like showing modal, and then getting rid of old success failure messages. Yeah, I'll buy that. I'm gonna buy Joe's fix there and add it there. Okay. And in this little bit of cleanup, again, being super explicit about what it is we want with this class name. Take it for drive. Nice. Bam, it works. Beautiful. Okay, beautiful. So this is kind of fun. Okay, task 5. Let's create a function to cancel a launch. I'm just going to give you 1 minute for this one because it's mostly copy and paste, although careful, always careful with copy and paste. All right, let's see. Anaya suggests the following. On the cancel button, we are adding event listener. Click. You're also prefer to inline the function, use the arrow syntax, and you are basically hiding the modal and showing the failure message. So let's take that for drive. Yes. Launch. No. Right. So this is good. And note how the page isn't reloading or anything like that. So we are able to massively change the appearance of the page without causing any reload. So it feels kind of like a desktop application, minus the design, of course. All right. So Maddie, I can see, prefer to declare the function separately. And it depends, right? There are some scenarios where the same listener might be applied on different places, perhaps, and then it might make sense to declare it separately, right? If it's only meant to be used here, then I guess we can inline it. So it's up to you. Okay, we're doing great. Task 6, it's a little bit more involved. We are going to use a keyboard event, just to rest from our click events a little bit more. The idea being that if we hit escape on the keyboard, okay, it should hide the modal, right? So that would make it feel like pretty real, okay? And it says, okay, so create a function that closes the modal if the user hits the escape key on their keyboard. Add it as an event listener for key down events on document. All right, so we are not attaching this one to any button, but to document. All right, we have seen how window can take on. We can use add event listener with window, but we can use add event listener with document. Okay, and how would we know? How would we know that a certain keyboard event should fire on document? Well, you look at you kind of search about information about the event, right? So prefix your search with MBN, key down, right? Go to Mozilla, and this is the page for the key down event with all the details. Okay, so the key down event is fired when a key is pressed. And I always do this, by the way. Whenever I'm trying to use some event, I will review this documentation and not just go blindly about it, right? So key down is fired when the key is pressed. Unlike key press, which sounds very similar, the key down event is fired for all keys regardless of whether they produce a character value. Super interesting. Now we know that we have a key press and a key down, but key press apparently is not fired for keys that don't produce a character, like the escape key. So it wouldn't work for the escape key. It wouldn't work for current scenario. So this event bubbles, and we'll see what that means in a second. And let's find us an example. So I'm going to scroll down. Okay, I'm going to scroll down, and we can see key down is added on document. So I shouldn't add it to window. I shouldn't add it to some particular element. So that's how we know how to use a particular event, because we read the documentation, we look for the example, and now we are ready. Okay, so I'm just going to get it started and let you figure out the rest. It should go something like document, add event listener. The event is key down. Okay. I'll inline, just so you can see all possible syntax, I'll just inline a traditional function that takes an event object. And here's my hints, right? Inside the event object is the key that fired the event, right? Because this is going to fire for any keys, okay? We need to know if the key pressed was escape or not, okay? If it was escape, dismiss the modal. Okay. So how do we, and can someone, I'm going to let you some time to dig inside the event object. All right, so you can either console log it, or you can put a breakpoint right in there, whichever you prefer, whichever technique you prefer. But investigate the event object and see how we might find which key gets pressed, right? So first, let's make sure this works, right? Open DevTools, plant a breakpoint. Okay, now with a breakpoint in place, I'm going to type some character. Okay, highlight the page. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it seems to be working. Let me try that again. I'm going to highlight the page first and then click on a key. So this basically seems to be working, but the question still stands. How do we know which key of the keyboard fired the event? Nice. A bunch of great. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. Okay. Okay. Some of you are like super quick to get the. Okay. So you're using a variety of strategies going on there. Okay. Excellent. 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 So let's take a. Let me let the counter die down and we'll walk through some of these. All right. So let's take a look. Okay. So, all right. So let's take a look. Event key. Maddie suggests that the information we want is living inside event key. Someone else was suggesting to use code, right? That would also be okay. And then full-blown solutions already. Okay, so Maddie, they stole your idea. They stole your idea because you see, they already did it. If event key equals esc, all right, modal class list. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. So if it'd been me, I would have put a breakpoint, triggered it, and then dig inside the event object there. Okay, dig inside the event object, trying to find. Okay, so there's a code of key B. Interesting. I pressed letter B, by the way. Oh, Maddie, you're correct. Here's a key with a character I pressed. The key code, someone was suggesting using the code. That would be perfectly valid also. Which, what is that? Okay, interesting. Let's allow the breakpoint. Let's get unstuck from the breakpoint by pressing the blue arrow. I'm going to type, I don't know, space bar. Let's see what that looks like. And let's see. The key is just literally white space. I didn't know that. Okay, blue arrow. Now I'm going to hit escape. See what that looks like. Code escape. Key escape. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. In the key code, someone was saying, hey, let's use number 27. They were completely correct. Okay. So, all right. So I'm going to steal from some, so all of those approaches would be correct, right? Let's do if event.key strictly equals escape, right? I have it run in front of me, right? So I know what's going to look like. So I'm fairly confident that this is when we should dismiss the modal and call it a day, right? Blue arrow to get unstuck, and let's take it for a drive. Launch. Nice. What about some other key? Excellent. So it only dismisses the modal on the event of the escape key. Great job, everybody. So all of your approaches would work, okay? Great work. Cool, let's keep going. Almost done. Task 7. Now, we're going to add, we're going to discuss event propagation because actually events propagate through the entire page, right? What I mean to say, let me just get my little whiteboard going on. Okay, excellent. Oh, you don't want to see that. You want to see that. Excellent. So you know how the DOM is kind of like a tree. Everything, well, of course, you know, window, the global object is at the top of everything. Then it's document or gateway to the DOM. And then we have the HTML, and then we have body, we have a div, and finally some button, which we're clicking with a cursor, right? So the user comes and clicks on the button. An event object is generated at the entry of everything, at the root of this tree, at window. And this event object travels through all the way down to the button. Okay, and then if the button has an event listener, attached to it, it goes boom, right? But the interesting part is that the event object does not die there. It enters the DOM, it travels to the button, the event listener on the button goes boom, but the story doesn't end there. The story doesn't end there. The event object will go to the div, will go or start bubbling up to div, to body, to HTML, to document, and to window, right? So the event object enters the DOM, travels to the target, and then back up, right? And as it goes back up, if any of these elements also has listeners attached to them with add event listeners, they also go boom, right? So imagine document had no fewer than two event listeners attached to it, so they both go boom, right? So with a single click, potentially we get a whole lot of event listeners firing, right? So let's visualize this, right? By type along me. Let's just do let's make a real array from document.all, right? So document.all is one of these shortcuts of the DOM, gives us a list with all the elements on the page, all right? And but of course that is not a real array, so we're going to turn it into a real array with array from. And now that we have a real array, we can do for each on it, all right? And for each element on the page, we are going to do stuff. Okay? For each element on the page, we are going to add event listener to each element on the page. lm.add event listener, click. And then, do we have something we can use? We had a listener somewhere that was a very sophisticated console log. There it is. Okay, so we're going to use just event listener. That event listener we declared there at the beginning of class, right? So let's just boom, add it there, right? And if your code is set up in a different way, well, you can always build it in a second, right? You could do event arrow, and I'll just copy and paste this whole console log there, right? Something like that. Okay, did you see that? All of this part is just the console log. The bones of the operation is just making a real array out of all the elements of the page, and then for each element on the page, we're going to add it an event listener. We care about clicks, right? And when a click fires on any element, all of this is what should happen. This little console log going on there. Okay. Okay, let's take that for drive. The idea, see if we can see now the situation. I'm going to move it out of the way so you can still copy my code. The situation here now is that we have actually added event listeners to all the elements on the page. So theoretically, with a single click, we should see all of those event listeners firing, not just on button, but on its parent, and its parent, and its parent, and its parent, all the way up to window. Okay. All right, so let's take it for drive. Ready? Launch. Boom. Check it out. All right. Now, if we want to, we can. So you can see we can see something strange though going on here. the target of the event stays constant. So clearly something has worked, right? So we're launching and we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 console logs there. So something must be working. This must be that bubbling thing we were talking about a second ago. But the target is always the innermost element that got clicked. Okay, so that's an important concept. This is true, but the target, what we define as target, is the most deep of all the elements that got clicked simultaneously. The target is the innermost element that got clicked, the most deeply nested. Okay, so how do we find out what element the listener fired on, right? Because all we're getting is the target. Well, there's another property on the event, which is called the current target. The current target will tell us on what element the listener is firing, right? Event.current target. And I know this is like super abstract stuff, right? So this is, it's all right if your understanding of this perfects and evolves over the coming weeks. This book, the Eloquent JavaScript, it has an excellent chapter on the DOM and events. Okay, so make sure to take a look at that. So let's see if we can visualize the bubbling a little bit better. Clicking. All right. Oh, of course, current target. We need something more readable. Because current target is the entire DOM node, right? So let's just do .node name. Let's try that. Launch. Okay. So see something interesting? We have several listeners on the button already, though this is the one we added at the very beginning of class. This is the one we're working on right now, right? So both fire, right? So what fires first is listeners on the target. Those go first. These two are listeners attached to the target with add event listener. But then the bubbling starts. Right? So the event object travels one level up to the div, right? And the div also has a click event listener attached to it, so that's going to go boom, right? Div is not the target. For all time, the target is the most deeply thing clicked, all right? But in this case, the div is the current target, right? And then as the bubbling continues, then the body, and then the HTML, all right? And that's the end of it, because there's no tag at a higher level than HTML, all right? Looking at Slido. It's saying that event is deprecated for confirm button add event listener. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that. I need more information. Andrew asks, to get the event target, can't you just put lm .node name? Yes, actually, but that would only work for the case of the yes, that you could actually that's clever. In the case of the target of the event, perhaps we could simply do lm.node name. Yeah, that would totally work. Let's try that. lm.node name, take it for drive, boom. And no. It's just no, it's not it's messing up with the it's the current target that's showing, not the target. We could do that for the current target. There we go. But I think it's just less confusing to to just grab everything from the event object. That way you can never get confused. Joe, if we're not using the event parameter, is it best practice to still include it in our anonymous function? No, actually. Best if you're not using it. So here the linter's complaining that event is defined but never used, right? If you don't actually need the event object for anything, the best thing would be to just get rid of it, okay? So I'm just leaving it there to be very explicit that these event listeners or handlers, they always take the event object, right? Great questions. When I push the OK button in the middle, the success message does not go away when I click OK. So that, let's see how we fix that. So go back to your launch modal, and besides the code for showing the modal, let's also include some cleanup for getting rid of those old success or failure messages, right? So hopefully that we didn't break that. Okay. Cool. Let's see. I think. Okay. Thomas. All was deprecated for me too. My VS Code wasn't accepting my all statement in array from. Interesting. Seriously, huh? Interesting. Interesting. Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, of course. We cannot access. Okay. All right. Excellent. Cool. So how's bubbling feeling now? Let's just kind of I'll just review bubbling once more, because this could be an interview question for you all, by the way. They asked me this once and I bombed it big time. Okay. So we're discussing click events only, right? We're talking about clicks, and we have a button on the page which is nested inside a div, which is nested inside body, which is nested inside HTML, which is nested inside document, right? We have all those levels of nesting going on, and suppose the user comes with a cursor and clicks on the button. What is the, now I ask you, and you can answer on Slack if you'd like, what is the target of this event, right? If the user comes with a cursor, clicking on the button, which of these is actually a target of the event? The button. But okay, so this is the target. But why is the button the target? How do we know? How do we know that the button is the target of the event? Because it's the most deeply nested. Correct. Okay, but we saw that the event is going to bubble up, right? So as the event bubbles up, the target is going to change, right? So first the target is the button, but then the target will become the div. True or false? Does the target change as the event bubbles up? Yes or no? Some say yes. You sure? No, the answer is for this particular click and for all time, the target is always the most deeply nested thing, right? As the event bubbles up, the current target will change, right? So for the same event object, as it travels up the DOM, while the event object is here, the current target is the button, and now the current target is the div, and now the current target is the body, right? So as the event bubbles up, the current target changes, but the target is always the inner most deeply nested element, right? So yes, it's totally like a chain reaction, okay? Let's review in a little bit of terminology. User clicks, you need to kind of have a general grasp of these things, right? The user clicks. An event object with all that information gets generated and enters the DOM, and then by default travels straight to the target in what's called the capture phase. Once it reaches the target, okay, so if the target has an event listener, we know I'm writing an array because you know that as far as click handlers go, right, the same element can have any number of handlers, right? So this is the A handler, the B handler. We can use add event listener repeatedly. You can use add event listener once, and we can use add event listener twice to add however many listeners to the same element, right? So when the event reaches the target, these listeners go boom in the same order in which they were added with add event listener. And this is called the target phase. The target phase, right? So after those listeners go boom, the event bubbles up to the div, right? So if the div has any listener, any click listener attached to it, it goes boom, right? Just like a chain reaction. And then the event object keeps going up. And if body has an event listener attached to it, it goes boom, right? And this is called the bubbling phase. Right? So again, you don't need to be an expert on event propagation today. Just be aware that it exists. All right. Yeah, sure. Okay. So what we did to kind of visualize the chain reaction is use this shortcut to grab all the elements on the page, turn them into a legit array, and for each element, we added a click event listener that logs all the information. Remember, the type of the event, of course, is click. The target of the event for all time is the most deeply nested element. And the current target will be changing as the event object bubbles up the DOM, right? That current target property will be a different thing, right? And again, it's the browser that takes care of invoking those event handlers. Without the browser, our code would be lost, right? Whew, okay. All right, before we leave, another interesting thing about the event object is that it can disrupt the default behavior of certain elements. All right, so for example, links. You know how by default, a link, when you click on it, takes you to the address listed on the href, right? So we can disrupt that default behavior the following way. Let's grab the link. Let's do document.querySelector. Let's grab the first link, right? And then we are going to add in a listener for click event, which takes an event object, and we do need it now. Okay, so far so good. So because we didn't have the first link saved into a variable, I'm just like grabbing it like that and then straight up invoking add event listener. And in there, we can use a method on the event object called prevent default, right? So prevent default, being a method, needs to be invoked. And prevent default has the effect of preventing the default behavior of this particular element on the events of clicks, all right? So whereas the second link still takes us places, the first link now is not doing much of anything, right? And we do need prevent default a lot when we're building single page applications. Because again, single page applications are pages that never reload. Single page applications are pages that never reload. We use JavaScript exclusively to do all kinds of DOM surgery to give the user the perception that they're changing screens or changing UI, right? But a lot of the default behaviors in HTML cause page reloads, which is not what we want, all right? So we gotta be aware that there's a way to disrupt the default behavior of a particular element, all right? Now, among the objectives also, we have stop propagation. And stop propagation is able to disrupt this whole propagation thing at any stage, right? So we can short circuit the bubbling and prevent chain reaction from happening at all. We can stop propagation in its tracks at any point, right? No, prevent default. I'm looking at Slido. Prevent default does not prevent bubbling, right? I'm teaching you a different thing. Prevent default does not interfere with it bubbling, right? Prevent stop propagation. Prevent. Let me just show you right here before where we did this operation. If you do event dot stop propagation and you invoke it like that, okay, look what happens in the console. Click on launch, and all we get is the listeners on the target and nothing else, and nothing else. All right, let me just remove the stop propagation so you can see. Now if you launch, you can see the bubbling going on, right? These two listeners are attached to the target. They both fire. And then the chain reaction continues on the div, on the body, on HTML, right? So let's add stop propagation and boom. I did 2 clicks, sorry. Boom, there we go. All right, so no bubbling. We disrupted the bubbling with stop propagation, which is not something you probably want to do unless you have a good reason for doing it. But yeah, there it is. There it is. Sam, and we don't want page reloads. We definitely do not want page reloads with single page applications because that's horrible UI because the page reloads, it's slow. It's much faster to build an application that kind of does things like visually instant, like a real desktop application would, right? Without the need for changing locations and reloading the browser, right? So prevent default will be used often, again, to prevent nasty browser reloads, particularly later with React. And Harry, no, prevent default doesn't prevent bubbling. Stop propagation. This is what disrupts propagation. Okay. Why didn't prevent default work for the second link? Because we targeted the first one only. We targeted the first. Remember how query selector, if we pass it a CSS selector that's very generic and matches several things on the page, it'll just return the first one encountered, right? So in this situation, we only prevented the default behavior on the first link. The second link is still working. Great question. Does prevent default stop the capture phase or interfere? We could disrupt but we would need to set up. Okay, so all right, so this is a little bit more advanced. All right, so we can totally schedule listeners to fire on capture, right? So say example, the one on the HTML. We could attach the listener on HTML, for example, or on any tag. We could configure it to fire on capture. We totally could, right? It's just a matter if when you add an event listener and say, let me see. If you add a third argument of true, right, that makes the listener fire during capture instead of bubbling, right? So it makes the order go crazy a little bit because then the first listener to fire is the one where we specified that we want to fire the listener on capture. So if this includes a stop propagation, yeah, it'll definitely stop the event from reaching the target. Okay. Why would we want to stop bubbling? I agree. I don't think there are that many good reasons to stop bubbling. It sometimes happens when we have very complicated scenarios where we have, for example, we need that some functionality happen on button click, but for some reason we need some different functionality triggering on the parent of the button, right? And we have these two listeners, and sometimes developers, out of laziness, deal with bugs by simply stopping the propagation of events, right? But that's rarely the correct answer. All right. So yeah, do not use stop propagation unless you must. There's usually better ways to deal with problems like, oh, but the listener on the div is messing with the listener on button. So if the one on button fires, I'm going to stop propagation to prevent it from reaching the div. So let me see something. Let me give you an example. Imagine a div that has a button in it, right? So you want. So of course, the click on the button should trigger some functionality, but for some design reason, if the user clicks outside on the div, we also need some sort of functionality, all right? So, if the application is not coded correctly, there can be bad interactions when this click happens. The event is going to bubble, and it's also going to trigger the event listener on the div, right? And sometimes developers don't want this. And instead of consolidating those two listeners into one, they will just be lazy and use stop propagation, and just don't use stop propagation lightly, okay? Oh, it'll make sense with time. Lots of questions. David asks, why is it that when I put document query selector, the console returns the error and says, add event listener is not a function? Because you're using query selector all. You can't use, remember, the most important danger of this week is to be clear on what it is we're dealing with. If you do query selector all, okay, you are not getting you're not getting an element anymore. You're getting a list of elements, and lists of elements do not have an add event listener method, which is what we're seeing here, right? If you want to use query selector all, we need to loop, and we need to do for each, right? So for each link, right? So we need to do link.add event listener, right? So you need to do a loop. So let me see if I can match those parentheses correctly. And now we have disrupted, we have prevented default behavior for all the links on the page, right? So this is what I suspect you wanted to do. But does that make sense? Let me see if I can format it a little bit better. Okay, so there we go. Okay, David, does that make sense? Brandon is asking, how does loading in elements via JavaScript in a single page application affect SEO, page caching versus, okay, so yeah. So single page applications haven't been great for SEO. But the spiders crawling the web are getting better at grabbing that ball of JavaScript and kind of like, but agree, it's not super great for SEO. It totally, that is totally true. Matt asks, does prevent default stop? Oh yeah, we did that. So stop propagation will mess with propagation, as it says, right? So if we call it on on a listener. Yeah. Okay. It's lunchtime. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, one more. Harry. Apologies for running late. Why in my document the all is crossed out in my code and says all is deprecated? Oh man. I don't know. Perhaps they are deprecating document.all. Document.all? I don't know. I'm not getting that stuff. Let me just quickly document all deprecated. Document all versus, okay. Interesting. Oh, you're right. So don't use document all. We're just using for teaching purposes. Okay. I can't think of a proper use case for using document all in a real application. So yeah, you're totally correct. Deprecated. Great job. Okay, my friends. Thank you so much for making it this far. Have fun this afternoon. It's a very creative exercise. You will have to research lots of different types of events and try to do crazy stuff with a page. Okay, so go crazy. Have fun. Let's see you after lunch.